The galaxy had rules. Every species learned them early, carved into their survival instincts by millions of years of natural selection. Rule 1 was simple. When the Kretak Dominion arrived in your system, you surrendered. Not because surrender guaranteed survival, but because resistance guaranteed extinction. The Kretak were older than most stellar civilizations, their empire spanning 2,000 worlds, their war fleets capable of cracking planets like eggs. They had conquered for 50,000 years, and in all that time across all those worlds, no species had ever made them bleed. Then they found Earth. Commander Vehicle stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Endless Victory, watching the blue-green planet rotate peacefully on his view screen. His 4 eyes narrowed with something close to boredom. Another primitive world, another easy conquest. His scouts had reported that humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel, that their weapons were laughably outdated, that their civilization was fragmented into hundreds of competing nations. It would take 3 days, maybe 4, to break them completely. After that, the humans would join the other tributary species, working Kretak mines and factories until their sun went cold. Vehicle activated the communication array, broadcasting on all frequencies. His translator would convert his words into every human language simultaneously. This was standard procedure, the same speech he had given 100 times before to 100 different species. Humans of Earth, he began, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability itself, you have been selected for integration into the Kretak Dominion. Resistance is extinction. Surrender is survival. You have 12 hours to transmit your unconditional capitulation. Choose wisely. He closed the channel and turned to his tactical officer. Deploy orbital platforms. Standard suppression pattern. I want their military installations mapped and ready for elimination if they're foolish enough to refuse. The officer clicked acknowledgement, and within minutes, 1,000 automated weapons platforms began spreading across Earth's orbit like a metallic disease. Vehicle expected panic. He expected desperate diplomatic transmissions. He expected, perhaps, some token military response that his shields would swallow without noticing. What he didn't expect was silence. For 11 hours and 57 minutes, the humans said nothing at all. Their cities continued their normal routines. Their military forces didn't mobilize. Their leaders didn't broadcast emergency messages. They simply continued existing as if the most powerful empire in the galaxy hadn't just demanded their surrender. Then, with 3 minutes remaining, a single transmission came through. It was audio only, no video, and the voice was calm, almost friendly. Commander Vehicle, this is Secretary General Martinez of the United Earth Government. We've reviewed your offer. Our answer is no. There was a pause, and Vehicle felt his secondary hearts begin to race with something he hadn't experienced in decades. Confusion. You should also know, Martinez continued, that your orbital platforms just stopped working. We've been inside your system since you entered our solar system. Your weapons won't fire. Your shields are at 30% and dropping. Your engines are going to shut down in about 40 seconds. Vehicle's bridge erupted into chaos. Officers shouted status reports, alarms screamed, and every system display flashed red. His weapons officer was hammering controls that no longer responded. His shields were indeed collapsing, peeling away like dead skin. And his engines, the massive drives that could push a dreadnought to 0.9 light speed, were powering down despite every override command. How? Vehicle demanded, his voice cracking. How did you penetrate our systems? Our security is quantum encrypted, physically isolated, designed by the greatest minds in the Dominion. Martinez's voice came back, still calm, still friendly. Commander, we've been hacking each other's computers for 300 years. We've had criminal networks that could break into any system ever built. We've had teenage kids who could crash government databases for fun. When your scouts showed up 6 months ago, we had our best people working around the clock. Your encryption was impressive, but you made one mistake. You assumed you were dealing with primitives. The Endless Victory went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the bridge in red. Vehicle's crew stared at their useless consoles, at their commander, waiting for orders that wouldn't matter. Outside, the 1,000 orbital platforms drifted as dead metal, and across the fleet, 50 other Kretak warships were experiencing the same catastrophic failure. So here's what's going to happen, Martinez said, and now there was iron beneath the friendliness. You're going to sit in orbit nice and quiet while we board your ships. You're going to tell us everything about the Dominion, every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every weapon you've built. And then, Commander Vehicle, we're going to take your ships apart piece by piece, learn everything you know and build something better. Because that's what humans do. We learn. We adapt. We never stop improving. Veekel collapsed into his command chair, his 4 eyes wide with the realization that was sweeping through him like ice water. The Krethak Dominion had finally found something they had never encountered in 50,000 years of conquest. They had found a species that didn't just survive through strength or numbers or technology. They had found a species that survived through pure, stubborn, relentless ingenuity. They had found humans. Outside his viewport, small human ships were approaching, and Veekel knew with absolute certainty that the galaxy's rules had just changed forever. The unbreakable. 3 months later, the Krethak High Council convened in emergency session for the first time in 4,000 years. The council chamber was a massive sphere of polished obsidian, floating in orbit around the Dominion capital world, a place where the Empire's 12 supreme archons made decisions that affected trillions of lives. They had gathered here to discuss plagues, rebellions, and the occasional interspecies war, but never had they convened to discuss a single lost fleet. Until now. Archon Theldris, eldest of the council and veteran of 800 campaigns, stood at the center of the sphere, his holographic form flickering with barely controlled rage. "Explain to me," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "how 50 warships, including 3 dreadnoughts, simply vanished. Explain how Commander Veekel's entire invasion force went silent. Explain how a species that barely achieved lightspeed managed to make the Krethak Dominion look like fools." The intelligence director, a small nervous creature named Kelix, projected data across the sphere's interior surface. "My Archon, we've pieced together what happened from long-range sensor data and intercepted communications. The humans didn't destroy our ships. They captured them. All of them. They used some form of advanced electronic warfare we've never encountered, shutting down every system simultaneously. Then they boarded, captured our crews without killing them and took everything. Ships, weapons, data cores, everything." Another Archon, Mordessa the Conqueror, laughed bitterly. "Impossible. Our systems are isolated, quantum encrypted, built with 5-layer redundancy. No species has ever penetrated them, not even the Xyloth Collective with their neural processors." Kelix's display shifted, showing grainy footage recovered from a spy satellite. It depicted human technicians swarming over a Krethak dreadnought like insects over a carcass, cutting into hulls, extracting components, working with a speed and efficiency that seemed almost frantic. They didn't just penetrate our systems, Archon Mordessa. They understood them. Completely. Within days of capture, they were reverse engineering our technology. Within weeks, they were improving it. Our scouts report that humans are now retrofitting their own ships with our weapons, our shields, our drives. But they're not copying us. They're making everything better, lighter, faster, more efficient. The sphere fell silent. For a species that had conquered for 50 millennia, the concept of being out-engineered by primitives was almost incomprehensible. Theldris finally spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of terrible decisions. "Then we glass their world. Immediately. We send the 5th Armada, 200 ships, and we reduce Earth to molten slag before they can spread this infection further." But Kelix raised a manipulator appendage, a gesture of desperate interruption. "My Archon, we tried. The 5th Armada departed 17 days ago. They arrived at Earth's solar system yesterday. They lasted 4 hours. The display shifted again, showing scattered debris fields where proud Krethak warships had once been. The humans met them with a fleet of their own ships, retrofitted with our technology but modified beyond recognition. Our warships couldn't penetrate their shields. Our weapons couldn't track their fighters. And they had something new, something we've never seen. Kinetic bombardment platforms that accelerate projectiles to 98% light speed. One hit destroyed a battlecruiser. The 5th Armada retreated with 40% casualties. The council chamber erupted. Archons shouted over each other, demanding answers, strategies, solutions. How could this happen? How could a species they had dismissed as primitives destroy a Krethak Armada in 4 hours? Theldris raised his primary arms, demanding silence. When the chamber quieted, he turned to his military strategist, General Kurvax, who had been silent throughout the meeting. "General," Theldris said carefully, "you've studied human history. You've analyzed their military records. Tell us what we're facing." Kurvax stepped forward, his scarred carapace bearing the marks of 100 battles. He had conquered 30 worlds personally, and his tactical assessments were legendary. But now his voice carried something the council had never heard from him before. Fear. Archons were not facing a typical species. Humans don't follow the normal patterns of warfare. Most species, when threatened with extinction, either surrender or fight with everything they have in one decisive battle. Humans do neither. They adapt. Constantly. Relentlessly. I've studied their wars and every single one follows the same pattern. They start losing, they learn from their mistakes, they develop new tactics, new weapons, new strategies, and then they win. He projected images across the sphere, showing human conflicts throughout their history. Medieval knights adapting to gunpowder. Biplanes evolving into jet fighters. Nuclear weapons emerging from peaceful atomic research. They call it innovation, but it's more than that. It's survival instinct weaponized. They don't just fight wars, they revolutionize warfare itself. And now we've given them access to technologies they would have taken centuries to develop on their own. We've accelerated their development curve by 1,000 years, and we did it by attacking them first. Archon Mordessa slammed her appendages against her podium. Then what do you suggest, General? That we surrender to primitives? That the Krethak Dominion, rulers of 2,000 worlds, simply accept defeat? Kervax turned to face her directly, his eyes hard with certainty. I suggest we negotiate. Immediately. Before they bring the fight to us. Because make no mistake, Archons, that's exactly what they're going to do. Humans don't just defend their territory. Once they decide you're an enemy, they don't stop until you're no longer a threat. And right now, we're the biggest threat in their galaxy. As if summoning his words into reality, alarms began screaming throughout the council chamber. A communications officer burst into the sphere, his voice panicked. Archons. Multiple faster-than-light signatures detected. Emerging at the edge of the capital system. Configuration matches modified Krethak dreadnoughts with human energy signatures. Theldris felt his blood run cold. How many ships? The officer's voice cracked. 112, my Archon. And they're broadcasting a message. Audio only. They're asking to speak with whoever's in charge. The sphere's central display activated, and a human voice filled the chamber. It was female this time, calm and professional, speaking flawless Krethak standard. Attention Krethak High Council. This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We're here to discuss terms. You tried to conquer us. You failed. You tried to destroy us. You failed again. Now we're at your doorstep with a fleet built from your own technology, improved with human ingenuity, crewed by people who really don't like being threatened. So here's the deal. You leave humanity alone, you free every species you've enslaved, you dismantle your empire peacefully, or we dismantle it for you. You have 12 hours to decide. And before you think about fighting, remember, we're the species that turned your dreadnoughts into scrap in 4 hours. Imagine what we can do to your homeworld. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. 12 supreme archons, rulers of an empire older than most civilizations, stared at each other with the dawning realization that everything had changed. They had tried to conquer humanity and had instead awakened something that would reshape the entire galaxy. Theldris looked around at his fellow archons and spoke the words none of them wanted to hear. Prepare a diplomatic response. And someone find out if we even have anyone who knows how to surrender, because I suspect we're about to learn. The unbreakable. The surrender was signed 6 hours later, not because the Krethak were cowards, but because Archon Theldris was old enough to recognize inevitable defeat when it stared him in the face. The treaty was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Krethak Dominion didn't just withdraw from human space. They agreed to immediate cessation of all conquest operations, the release of 417 enslaved species, and complete transparency regarding every military installation, weapon platform, and colonial outpost they controlled. In exchange, humanity agreed not to glass their homeworld and to provide technical assistance in transitioning from an empire to something the humans called a confederation of equals. But the real shock came when Admiral Chen made her final demand. We want access to your historical records. Every species you've conquered, every war you've fought, every mistake you've made. We're going to learn from all of it. Theldris had agreed immediately, because he understood something fundamental about humans that most species would take decades to grasp. They didn't just want victory. They wanted knowledge. And knowledge, in human hands, was more dangerous than any weapon the Krethak had ever built. 2 years after first contact, the galaxy looked completely different. The Krethak Confederation, as it was now called, had become humanity's unlikely partner in reshaping galactic civilization. Dozens of former tributary species were discovering freedom for the first time in centuries, and human advisors were everywhere, helping rebuild governments, establish trade networks, and teach the one thing humans seemed to do better than anyone else: adapt and improve. Earth itself had become a hub of innovation, where alien technologies mixed with human ingenuity to produce advancements that astonished even the oldest civilizations. Commander Vikal, no longer a commander of anything, stood in what humans called a coffee shop, in downtown Geneva, waiting for his appointment. He had spent the last 2 years in what amounted to comfortable imprisonment, debriefed endlessly by human intelligence services, teaching them everything he knew about Krethak military doctrine, technology, and imperial structure. He had expected execution or at minimum life imprisonment. Instead, the humans had offered him a job. Secretary General Martinez walked in right on time, carrying 2 paper cups of something that smelled bitter and chemical. He handed one to Vikal with a smile. Commander. Or should I say Ambassador Vikal? That's your new title if you accept. Vikal took the cup cautiously, sniffing the dark liquid inside. Coffee, the humans called it. They were addicted to the stuff, drank it constantly, claimed it helped them think. He had tried it once and spent 6 hours convinced his heart was going to explode. Ambassador to where, Secretary General? I'm a war criminal by my own people's standards. The Confederation Council voted to strip me of rank and citizenship. Martinez sat down across from him, sipping his coffee like it was water. Ambassador to the Galactic Council. We're establishing one, by the way. 30 species so far, more joining every month. We need someone who understands how the old empire worked, someone who can help us avoid repeating history's mistakes. You conquered 100 worlds, Vikal. You know how imperial systems fail. That makes you valuable. Vikal set down his cup, his 4 eyes studying the human carefully. What? Why offer this to me? I tried to conquer your world. I would have enslaved your entire species without a second thought. Martinez leaned back, his expression growing serious. Because holding grudges is expensive and we've got bigger problems to solve. Look, Vikal, we've been studying galactic history since we got access to the Krethak archives. You know what we found? This pattern repeats every few thousand years. One species gets powerful, conquers everyone else, builds an empire, eventually collapses, and the cycle starts over. The Krethak did it. The Xyloth before them. The Vormesh before that. It's the same story over and over, and it always ends the same way. With millions dead and civilizations destroyed. He pulled out a data pad, sliding it across the table. The display showed a complex web of connections, trade routes, diplomatic channels, and mutual defense agreements. We want to break the cycle. Build something that lasts. A real coalition where species cooperate instead of conquering each other. But we can't do it alone, and we can't do it by pretending the past didn't happen. We need people like you who understand what went wrong to help us build something better. Vikal stared at the data pad, his mind racing. It was ambitious, possibly insane, and so typically human that he almost laughed. They had defeated the most powerful empire in the galaxy in less than a year, and now they wanted to reorganize galactic civilization from the ground up. And if I refuse? Martinez shrugged. Then you stay here, comfortable but useless while history happens around you. Your choice. He stood up, preparing to leave, then paused. You know what the other species are saying about humans? They're calling us the bridge builders. The species that turned enemies into allies. Some of them think we're naive. Others think we're brilliant. Me. I think we're just practical. We learned a long time ago that making friends is cheaper than making war. He left the coffee shop, leaving Vikal alone with his thoughts and his terrible coffee. Outside the window, Geneva bustled with activity. Humans hurried past, mixed with dozens of alien species now living openly on Earth. Krethak, Xyloth, Vormesh, species that had been enemies for millennia, now sharing sidewalks and conversations. It was chaotic and messy and completely improbable, and somehow it was working. Vikal picked up the data pad again, scrolling through the proposed structure of this galactic council. It was brilliant in its simplicity. No single species in charge. No emperor, no dominion, no central authority that could be corrupted. Just representatives from every member species, voting on issues that affected them all, with humans acting as mediators and, when necessary, enforcers. They had even built in safeguards, systems to prevent any one species from accumulating too much power, learned from studying the failures of every empire that had come before. He realized something then, something that made his secondary heart sink with a mixture of awe and resignation. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Krethak Dominion. They had made them obsolete. They had proven that there was a better way to organize galactic civilization, a way that didn't require conquest or subjugation or endless cycles of war and collapse. And they had done it not through superior weapons or overwhelming force, but through something far more dangerous. Ideas. Vikal stood up, leaving his barely touched coffee on the table, and walked out into the Geneva afternoon. He would accept the position. Not because he believed in human idealism, but because he was smart enough to recognize when history was turning a corner. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation was beginning. And humans, those strange adaptable primates from a backwater world, were going to be at the center of it all. Above the city, a mixed fleet of human and Krethak ships patrolled in perfect coordination, protecting a planet that had been marked for conquest and had instead become the capital of a new galactic order. Vikal watched them pass overhead, their formation precise and professional, and allowed himself a small smile. The Krethak had come to Earth expecting to find primitives. They had found something far more terrifying instead. They had found the future. And the future, as it turned out, was unbreakable.